How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and today I'm going to be doing a really interesting video. It's kind of an idea that I thought of somewhat recently when we did our board games we cooled on. We got a really good response from that, not only in like the amount of views, but the comments and like just people reaching out and talking to us about it. And I think just the aspect of being critical and talking critically about board games, or just in general about things you're passionate about, like especially hobbies like board games, video games, books, sports, things like that can often, get a rise out of people in sometimes a not so positive way, because you feel very passionate about a team you cheer for, or a game you really love, or whatever the case may be, a character you resonate with, whatever, movies, TV shows, that sometimes we just feel like we have this like sense of ownership over, we have to defend it, like, and why we like it, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like that when growing up. Like the amount of times that I consider myself to be either like a PlayStation fanboy or a Nintendo fanboy or whatever, and felt like I had to defend those or say why they were better, or not want certain games I love to show up on other consoles, things like that. And as I got older, I think it's just something with like becoming an adult and growing up, that stuff just means so much less. Like you realize how little that stuff really means, and how important it is to have discourse and be critical about the things you love, because nothing is perfect. And if you're able to identify what you love about things, what you don't love about things, that you can take that away to other things in life, and to other games you're going to play, and to other books you're going to read, and other shows you're going to watch, and whatever the case may be. So what I thought I was going to do, what I want to do today, what I'm going to do today, is I have decided, because we're going to be doing our updated top 50 games of all time pretty soon, within the next month here, you're going to be seeing what our lists look like now. I thought I would take my top 10 games from last year's list, go from 10 to 1, and I'm going to say something that, or an aspect of that game that I don't like. So I'm going to say something I don't like about every single one of my games that are my top 10. Something that like I'm looking at critically and saying this is just, in my opinion, bad, or not good, or could be better, whatever the case may be. I feel like this is taking the games that are my favorite, the ones that I would keep over other games in my collection if I was having to get rid of stuff, whatever the case may be, and saying this is what's bad about them. And I feel like if we can all be doing that, if we can all be looking at things we love more critically, it's easier to have those kind of discussions on forums and YouTube comments, on Discord channels, on Reddit, and social media, and not get drawn into the idea of we have to argue about this because we have different opinions. So we're going to go through from 10 to 1. So if you haven't watched our top 50 games of all time, you don't know my top 10 games are, this will also be a reveal, I guess, of that for you. But I'm going to go and through them all. I'm just going to tell you I picked one thing for each one aspect of that game that I think is bad or that I don't like, and we're going to go over it. And you guys can let me know in the comments if you agree with any of these, if these are things that keep you from liking these games, or things that you don't agree with me on, that you think are actually good things about the games, whatever the case would be. We can talk about it afterwards in the comment and not argue about it. We can just have a discussion about it. So number 10, the first one on the list, my number 10 game of all time from last year was Azul. And so Azul is a game I obviously love. I play it still to this day on Board Game Arena in the physical version. It's one of the most played games in my collection, to be honest. I introduced it to a lot of people. What I don't like about Azul is the barrier that it presents around scoring and having to teach those rules to someone. Specifically just the fiddly nature of the scoring. And what I mean by that is that me having played a bunch of Azul, it seems super straightforward to me. And I think if you've played enough of Azul, it's probably not as big of a barrier, or just in general if you play a lot of board games. But it should be a game that I introduced to a lot more people, and you would think it would be one of the games that I'm just like, this is a game in my collection that when I'm gonna show someone a game, or someone who hasn't played board games in a while, I would default to Azul, because there's so much to love about it. And in many ways, it feels like it could be a gateway game, both in theme and just like the abstract nature of it. But when it comes to scoring, and then the fact that you have your tiles on the left, and you have to like build up a row of sometimes up to 5 tiles, but then what that allows you to do is to slide a single tile over, and that for some reason is just a weird barrier for a lot of people that don't play a lot of board games, or are used to more straightforward scoring. That one little aspect, that fiddliness of like, oh no, you don't take all the tiles, you're not moving all 5 tiles to this row of 5, or you're like, and then they don't understand, like, I'm collecting 5 red here to be able to get 1 red to move over. But they look at the board where it's sliding to, and they think, well, it's not all red. There's 5 different colors, so is that what I'm collecting on the side? Eventually we get there. It's not necessarily a breakdown in the game mechanics. It's just that fiddliness ends up making Azul less approachable than it should be. It should be this very, very approachable game that I'm introducing to lots of people. And I guess what I mean more is when I say introducing to people is people that don't often play board games. As like, so this could be a gateway game. It ends up failing as a gateway game when it really shouldn't. Whereas, like, for instance, a game that I introduce all the time, like Patchwork, never fails. Maybe the intricacies of like how to be ruthless in Patchwork and how to like win with someone who's played a lot, and the meanness of it is something that doesn't come from your first couple introductions or whatever. But the rules don't have that barrier that all of a sudden have you kind of be like, okay, hang on, I got to clarify, I don't understand this. Or the amount of times I've been like on turn 2 or turn 3 of Azul, and something about that transfer of tiles, or something about the scoring and how it's like when a tile goes over there, you score vertically and horizontally for how many are in that row separately. So if it's 3 tiles, 1, 2, and then 3 like this, like in a little L, you don't get 3 points, you get 2 this way and 2 this way for 4. Yes, it makes sense, and then like after you've played it and after you understand, but there's always that breakdown. It always ends up presenting a barrier, and it's always this like sigh I let out, being like, oh, like why does this have to be so complicated? Not even complicated, but like why does it have to be just a little bit too complicated to be able to have this just be something I whip out to introduce to anybody as their first gaming experience or whatever. So that's the one thing I don't like about Azul that I always come back to, and me and Carlo have talked about that all the time. Number 9 was Santorini, which is a game I also love, obviously. I shouldn't even say that. I obviously love all these games. They're my top 10. So this one, it was easy for me, and that is that there are so many god powers in Santorini, and they're all so unique. It's one of the things I love about Santorini is like all the different powers and how they all mesh together. But it will often happen in some combinations are just straight up not fun. And I don't mean that from a sense that like, oh, it's broken to do this combination, because there, I think in the rulebook it specifically says like, don't do these combinations, or on the cards or something it says like, this should not be used in conjunction with this god power. That's a separate thing. It's not that they're broken, it's just they're not fun. They're just not engaging, even though the rulebook has not called them out as being, you know, not compatible or whatever. And the only way to figure that out is to play the game and realize, oh, that wasn't fun. And so it feels like sometimes Santorini can be a trial and error of what are good matchups. And then the tough thing is, do you remember that those were bad matchups, or do you keep tabs for yourself and say, okay, in the future these matchups aren't fun? Like, it's tedious. It's like not everyone's going to write down a list and be like, okay, Zeus doesn't go good with Aphrodite or whatever. Like, you have, I just threw 2 random ones. I can't really remember what their powers are, but like, that's not something that's necessarily fun to engage in, having to like keep track of that. But that's really the only way to do it, to try to avoid instances where you're like, well, we just, you know, and they're not long games, so it's not the worst in the world, but like to play a session and be like, well, that was not a fun combo, or that wasn't an engaging session, or that wasn't as fun as last time we played. So the highs with Santorini are so high and so great, but you have to almost in some ways keep track of these lows and these bad combos to avoid these sessions where you're like, oh, that was really disappointing. And that's just one thing that's just annoying to keep track of with Santorini. It's something I come back to where I'm like, this is something I definitely don't like, and I'm not even sure how to alleviate it, but it's there, and it's something that's not great. Number 8, Lost Cities. So Lost Cities, this one is, I guess the reasoning for this one is a little bit specific to me and less about the game, and I was trying to not have that be what I gravitate towards for my reasonings, but for Lost Cities, it kind of had to be, because it's, out of all these games, I think it's the one I've played the most because of how much I've played it on Board Game Arena, how much me and Carlo have played it. I played the physical version with a bunch of different people. I love this game, but now, because of how much I have personally played it, I can't introduce this to new people. It's impossible. If I introduce this to someone new for the first time, it's so simple. It should be so easy, or it is so easy to introduce it from a rules perspective to anyone. But because I've played so much of it and so ruthlessly, and I understand the meanness of it and how to like, you know, the deeper strategy of it, at this point, if I introduce anyone to it, they have such a bad experience, because I either destroy them because I understand the strategy, and they can't then have the time and the grace to wrap their heads around, you know, oh, how do I win in this game? Oh, it's a hand management. Oh, I understand this, because I'm just thrashing them. Not because I'm so good at Lost Cities, but it's one of those games that when you've played it enough, you either have to like purposely play worse or not do your best to have it be enjoyable for the other person, or you just have to trash them because it takes a few games, like in some cases, you know, 5, 6 games or whatever, or more, to really understand how to play with someone who is, you know, even if they're not being competitive, they just have that know-how, they have that experience. So for me, Lost Cities is a game that I love playing on Board Game Arena now, but in the physical version, aside from like Carlo, there's no one I really have that I can reliably play with enough that except for maybe, I think Braden has played it before, and I think I'd be confident playing with Braden, and even if I ended up, you know, really doing a lot better than him in a game, I think he catches on to those kind of mechanics quickly, and he would know from that first initial play or first few plays, pick up on things a little bit quicker because of the amount of games he's played. But in terms of like introducing someone new or like new to games to Lost Cities, it's just not going to happen. It's such an easy rule set. It should be a good go-to, but I personally can't introduce this to people, and to me that's just something I don't like about Lost Cities now. And the fact that that game is prone to that, or over time it's just hard to introduce to new players if you played it more. It's kind of the same thing with like Root, as what I've heard, is like if you have a group of like 3 people who play Root consistently, you bring in a 4th who's never played Root, they're likely not going to have a good experience. It's a game that's prone to that, is I guess what I'm getting at. Number 7 is Biblios. So Biblios, this one was actually tough to come up with something I didn't like, and this is a good exercise because it kind of reminds me how much you like a game when you struggle to come up with things you don't like. And sometimes it's easier for certain games to come up with things you don't like. Biblios was challenging for me, but the one I came to that I remember from the most recent time we played, because we actually did play the physical version really recently, was sometimes you can have a string, or even just like by itself, a single decision that is really lame and really uninteresting and boring. And sometimes that can be multiple strings of them. And then if it happens in the first round that those decisions are coming, in the second round, those can continue to be uninteresting. What I mean by that is the way Biblios flows is, if it's my turn and we're playing 3 players, I draw a card and I either choose to keep that for myself, put it into the deck for the second round where we're going to bid on those cards, or I put it in the open area for the other 2 players to be able to pick from and choose. That is a great mechanic that works so good in Biblios. It's the thing I love so much about it. But sometimes the cards you draw, it's just a very uninteresting decision. Like, I draw a 3 gold to start, and I think that's great, and I want to keep that for myself. And the next 2 is just like 2 1 greens. And it's just like, okay, we'll put those out. Each of you take one. It's the same card. And yeah, that like there's no way around that. It's not necessarily, I guess it's not necessarily like a flaw in the game so much as it's like when that happens a lot, or when the way the cards come out, the decisions aren't as compelling, you can then just have a game of Biblios that feels a little bit less compelling. It's still fun. I've never had a game of Biblios that wasn't fun because of these reasons. But if you have a string of those too many, and then you go into the second round and you're bidding on cards that just are ones, and they seems kind of lame, and everyone's like, well, I bid 1, and everyone's like, pass, take your 1, and that's just kind of how it's going. There's still decision making happening there. There's still things you have to consider. Can't let someone just take all these low cards and then end up winning. But it just becomes like the least interesting aspect, I guess is what I'm saying, of Biblios, compared to all the more compelling decisions that happen way more often. Sometimes these little these uninteresting decisions can weigh down a session of Biblios just a little bit. But it's not something that like happens too much and too often. Number 6, Marvel Champions. This is where all the Marvel Champions fans are clicking in the timeline to this pick, because they know it's my top 10, and saying, what's Dylan going to say? He hates the Marvel Champions. I thought Dylan loved Marvel Champions. He hates it. So this one, it's funny because this is the only one I have 2 things on it. It's not because Marvel Champions is the worst than anything else on this list. It's because it's one of the ones I've played the most, and it naturally, I've just like, having played that much, having done so many reviews, having just done so much content on it, I feel very close to this game, and I'm just very aware of the things I like and don't like. So Marvel Champions, which one do I start with? I'll start with, so sense of purpose is what I'm gonna call this. What I mean by that is, because this is a cooperative only game, and you're not doing like player versus player dueling 1v1 like in the style of like Keyforge or Magic the Gathering, other card games like that, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, whatever, it can sometimes be hard to find the reason you're coming back to take on a villain you've already beat. Like, for instance, Rhino. If you beat Rhino a bunch, like, I use Rhino for testing purposes, but let's say like I'm not making content, I'm not a content creator, I'm not doing YouTube videos, I'm just playing for fun. If I've already thrashed Rhino a bunch and I get a new hero, sure, I can take that hero to Rhino and take on that scenario because I feel like it's just a good introductory one. But I'm less compelled. The sense of purpose is not there because I've already beat Rhino. And this could be something that's more unique to me, but it's the same thing in certain video games. Like once you've accomplished something, sometimes it's hard to find the thing that's bringing you back to play it again. It's the same thing as like hitting a super high score and like that's pretty clever or whatever. I think Carlo talked about this, and then realizing like, well, I think that's the highest score I'm ever going to get. Like your reason then for coming back is less interesting because it's like, well, I've already kind of done what I wanted to do in this game. And the same thing with like games like Micro Macro and you know, games with missions or campaign structures. Like a lot of them are susceptible to this. Marvel Champions is not as much as those games because it is ever evolving and more cards being introduced, but the reasons I'm deck building and creating new decks and playing new heroes is more about the heroes and not about those scenarios. Once you've beaten a scenario, especially a really difficult one, your reasons for going back are just a little bit less compelling. It's not like I still go back, and luckily there's constantly new campaigns and scenarios and everything coming back to the game. I just find that like you almost end up outgrowing the content, and I guess that's just, it's too bad that there is, from that regard, it's something that's unique to a cooperative game like this, because in Magic the Gathering, you technically never have that. For instance, I'm using that as an example here, but like in any card dueling game, you don't have that because you just can take on different opponents. You just take on a different opponent here, you're facing a different deck here, you have to use your sideboard this way, you have to modify to try to beat them, whatever. So it's just a little bit, it lasts longer, the longevity is there, whereas Marvel Champions I think suffers from that not being the case as much. And the other quick one I'll mention is just too much too often. There is so much content for Marvel Champions, and the great thing about it is obviously you don't have to buy it all. You're not obligated to buy all this content. If you don't like a hero, you don't have to buy that hero, and you can just play the ones you like. The reason you end up feeling compelled to get more of it, or that ends up not being the case, is because you're not just getting the hero, you're getting all the cards for deck building. And sometimes you'll have a hero that you're like, I'm not interested in that hero, but man, they come with all these great protection cards, and I love building protection decks, and so now I need this pack. And now not only is there a lot of content, sometimes they're releasing multiple packs in a month. Like we just had a situation, and I might be a little bit biased, I'm also creating content on this, and it puts more stress on me to create that, but when you get like an expansion box and 2 heroes coming out the same day, that's so much content to cover. Like at least for me as like an adult with a full-time job and also this like essentially a side job with the YouTube channel and everything, it's not like when I was like 15 and I could just spend an entire weekend playing this stuff, doing nothing else, and being like, yeah, give me 6 more packs. Like I love this, give me as many packs as you want. For me, it does hit a point where it's like, I can't keep up. Like even if I want this other pack right now, because I'm really excited about the Wolverine here or whatever, there's a situation where I'm like, please don't come out till next month because I cannot play this right now. I don't have the time or whatever because I'm already playing this pack and this pack and this expansion and this scenario. So there's just a lot. Again, it's not. You're not obligated to get it, but from a deck building perspective, if you want to continue to be able to like have new decks to build and evolve what you're building and have more fun with some of the heroes and try new aspects, then you do have to get more packs, even if you're not necessarily interested in the heroes because of the deck building purposes. So it's just something that the game suffers from that, like, again, may not affect everyone, but I just noticed that it affects me. Number 5, 7 Wonders Duel. Obviously a 2-player only game. I've played so much of this game. Again, one of my most played games on this list, and in general. The thing I don't like about 7 Wonders Duel is how luck can come into play in ways that just feels like it circumvents all the strategy you've done, all the planning you've done, and the way that you've organized everything. Like, luckily there are multiple ways to win the game, and so even if you're like having bad luck on one, you can sometimes lean into another and force your opponent to kind of react to that and then end up winning even though they were crushing you in another aspect. But what I specifically mean is the way that the pyramid structure works with these cards and revealing. I've lost so many games strictly because I am like, they need 3 shields to get the military victory on me, or they need 1 science symbol to get the science win on me, and it just comes down to which card they pick, or which card I kind of guide them to, or whatever, to be able to flip. And if they flip the one that has 3 shields, oh, I lost. And if they flip the one that has that science symbol, oh, I lost. And yes, part of that is always on you to make sure you're not like letting them get too far towards a military victory or a science victory. But in some cases, it just is just bad luck of where cards are, even just with like what resources you have access to sometimes it's just like you flip something for your opponent, oh, great resource for them. Oh, you flip another one, great resource for them. And you're continuing to be like, I still have no way to get wood, or whatever the case may be. So there are games where it feels like even when you're playing well, you lose because of bad luck. And most games have some aspect of that. Like that is just gaming in general, video games, board games, a lot of that is present. Even like games where you're just drawing from a deck, it comes down to like, what cards are you gonna draw, right? In any card dueling game. So I get that that's the thing. It just has always felt a little bit worse than Seven Wonders Duel for some reason. And I've just had games where I'm like, that's the last game I play for a night or something, because I'm like, well, that was a super frustrating way for that game to end. Or I think that's how I ended up losing out in the tournament, the AYCB tournament we did on Board Game Arena. Is one of the games I lost anyways, if not more. It was just like that kind of bad luck flip, and there was like the 3 shields. And I'm like, well, bad luck, like it just happened to be there or whatever. So that's the one thing I don't like about Seven Wonders Duel. I'm not sure there's a way to necessarily circumvent that. I know the expansions in some ways alleviate that because there's just more stuff going on. But in the base game, it just, yeah, it can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes. Number 4, Castles of Burgundy. This one's really simple to me because honestly, from a gameplay perspective, I have a hard time finding things I personally don't like about Castles of Burgundy. I really, really love this game, but I hate the theme. I think, and I shouldn't even say the theme. The theme, it's not the theme I hate. I just don't like the aesthetics, the look, they came out with the anniversary edition. I don't have the anniversary edition, but I've seen the artwork and everything on it. I honestly don't think, I don't even know if I think it's an improvement. I think that it's more colorful, but I don't think it's done anything to like change the things I didn't like about the original. I think it's a little bit more vibrant and bright and pops a little bit more for sure. But I think that so maybe it's a combination of wanting a different theme / a different style of artwork. I see so many beautiful board games now out there. Like there are just so many beautiful board games. And because of how much I love Castle of Burgundy, how good of a game I think it is, it's one I just wish so much had this really beautiful coat of paint on it and was just super attractive on the table, because I'm never gonna stop playing this game. And I just want people to be as excited when they are seeing it for the first time, instead of being like, oh, so this is what we're playing. And then have to be like, trust me, it's not the way it looks, it's not boring or whatever. So that's just, again, it could be a personal preference thing. I know some people really kind of like this style in their games, and there's a lot of games that obviously use it. But for me specifically, this is one I just wish had a different coat of paint on it because of how much I love the gameplay, and just I'm not attracted to the look and the style of it. Number 3 is Keyflower. Keyflower, and this one again, it's possible this could be based on our group and the people we've played with. But I just think that with how much I love Keyflower, it's my 3rd favorite board game of all time. I think it's such a phenomenal game. It is often just too long. I think that I wish I could just consistently shave like 40 minutes off of Keyflower. I think if it was a snappier, shorter experience every time I played it with and I'm talking when you're playing with like 4 players, because like Keyflower is a game, like often I prefer playing games at 2 and 3. It just, on average, I would say, it's not every situation, but on average, that tends to be the 2 counts I enjoy a lot. With Keyflower, I would be compelled, I would almost always want to play with 4, and I'd be compelled to play with 5 and even try 6 one day. But the thing that keeps me from wanting to play with 5 or 6 is the length of the game, because when we play with 4, even online where the setup's like taken care of for you and everything, our games have ended up being like 2.5 to 3 hours. It's possible that's the groups we play with, but regardless, I still think it's a game that is just too long. And I wish, like I said, I could just shave off like 40 minutes at least off of every single game and have it just be shorter, snappier, quicker, and that way be a game that I can introduce reliably more often, instead of having so many situations where I think, oh man, this group would love Keyflower, but oh, I don't. It might be pulling it tight, or this is the only game we'll play then if we play this. I just wish I could guarantee that it was like an hour-and-a-half experience every time, because I would get it to the table so much more often. All right, number 2 is A Feast for Odin. This one is maybe this is the one everyone wanted to see, because we have all our Feast for Odin Agricola, conversations and debates and verses and everything. And now I'm going to trash the game that I am vouching for. I'm going to have to make Carlo do this for Agricola after. So Feast for Odin, this one was an easy one for me. It has this barrier for not only new players, but just people when you haven't played it in a while, or even when you have played it a bunch, where The rules are really simple in Feast for Odin, I think. I honestly don't think the rules are very complicated. It's the action board. The action board is too imposing. And I will preface this by saying, I'm talking about the base game. I have the Norwegians, but I still have not played it with the Norwegians. Next time I play it, and pretty much probably all times I play it going forward, I'm going to be playing it with the expansion. I've heard that it's just a really good addition to the game, and it does change the action board. But talking like base Feast for Odin, which is where everyone is starting, when you get into Feast for Odin, unless you buy the expansion with it, but that's rarely how people purchase their games. It is so imposing. Like, I remember introducing this to people, and it's like, okay, we've got the rules down, and now you have to sit there for 25 minutes and look at all the actions so you can understand, okay, but I need to know what I can do on my turn. I can't just take a turn and then while you're doing your turn be looking, because my turn is picking one of these slew of actions. So I have to know, okay, what is whaling? What is pillaging? What is going to the market here? What is getting a cow do, or getting livestock or whatever? Like, you have to understand all the actions to play it effectively, and to not miss something. And so much of that first game, and just a lot of games in general, is just like, okay, wait, what can I do here? And there's just a lot of that analysis paralysis. It's a game that's just really prone to that, not because you're necessarily thinking like, what's the best strategy? Sometimes that, but also you're just trying to remember, like, what can I do again? What are all the things that are capable of? I just find that is a tough barrier for Feast for Odin. It gives you all these options right from the start in front of you and says, what do you want to do? And you're spending so much time going, what can I do? And I have to figure out what I can do. So that's the one thing with Feast for Odin that I sometimes struggle with. And if it doesn't necessarily affect me, it ends up affecting other people on the table. And because I want them to like the game, that has a negative impact on me as well. Number one, of course, is Gloomhaven. This was my number one game of all time last year. If you want to see if it keeps that spot, you're going to have to watch our top 50 this year. This one, the thing I don't like about Gloomhaven is the narrative, the story. I think that Gloomhaven is such a deep, involved, long experience that we shared over 2 years, meeting consistently with a group, and I treasure those moments. I love that we had this group that we were getting together with regularly and playing, and I love the gameplay, and I love unlocking classes and exploring all the classes and playing different ones and retiring characters. I love so much about Gloomhaven. I just really, really wish that the story was way more compelling, because that's really the one thing it was missing. I'm curious to see what it ends up being like in Frosthaven, especially with them introducing more stuff going on in between scenarios in the town and things like that, like unlocking things. I'm hoping that there's more of a cohesive narrative there that's interesting. And in general, campaign games and providing a compelling narrative is, like, for board games, is just, it's a tough sell. It's a tough thing to do. It's different than something like Dungeons and Dragons, where that is the experience and that is such a large part of it, and it's all about making these really amazing deep stories. In a board game where you're just reading often, out of a journal, and then saying, okay, like, let's play the game now or whatever, it's easier to get disconnected from the story and not feel that connection. And I think no board game that I can think of has really nailed that I've played in a way that I felt super drawn in to the narrative of a board game. There's been times I've been interested in it, like Tainted Grail, for instance. Even though I had problems with the game, I found the narrative to be very compelling at times. But even that, I wouldn't say that I was anywhere near as invested in it as some of the best books I've read or movies or shows I've watched or whatever. So, and Gloomhaven is just not even an example of one done well. I just don't think that Gloomhaven's story is very good. And I think everything else about it is amazing. It's my number one game of all time as of last year. But I do think that the narrative is lacking. And that's something I'd love to see them be able to expand on and get better on. With Frosthaven going forward, I'm excited to see if they do. There you have it. Those are my top 10 games of all time, and something I don't like about every single one of them. I think this is a really important exercise. I think we need, and I've preached this before, or not preached, but I've said it before, we're really aware of our comment section, our Discord and everything, and people being able to have healthy debates and discussions about differences they have in games. Carlo loves games that I hate, or that I dislike or whatever, and vice versa. We've never argued about that, even when we've had little mini debates about it or talked about things that we disagree on. That's so healthy and so important, and I always hate to see when someone comments on something somewhere and says, a great example was the most recent Thor movie, Love and Thunder. A lot of people didn't like that movie. I actually really liked it, and that should just be where it ends. That should just be yeah, some people like it and some people don't. And yet, someone would bring something up on like a Reddit post or whatever, being like, I don't understand how people don't like this movie. And it's like, what do you mean you don't understand? It's this, this, this. And it just becomes this argument about like people saying, well, but this, but this, but this, but this, in a way that doesn't seem healthy. It would be different to be like, oh, that's interesting that you don't like it. Like, I actually found I really did like it for these reasons. Someone to be like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, for some reason that didn't land with me that way. Like, you can have those healthy without having to feel like I have to defend my stance because I feel really insecure about someone else having a different stance than me. And I feel like that insecurity, just we all get lost in it sometimes. So I think this is I had fun doing this. I think we need to have this more kind of like open discussion of things we don't like in everything, but specifically because we're running a board game channel in board games. So you just heard something I didn't like about my top 10 games. What is your top game of all time and what don't you like about it? That's what I want to know. You don't have to give me all 10, but tell me in the comments, what is your #1 board game of all time? And don't tell me anything you like about it or why it's your #1. Tell me what you don't like about it, because that's what I think we need to be talking about and being able to do it in a way that's healthy and we can all have that discussion. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I had really fun doing this. If you like this kind of concept, this kind of spin on things, let me know, because maybe I can convince Carlo to do the same thing, or maybe we'll do other videos like this in the future, or even do ones about games like we don't like, but here's the things we like about them. I think it's an interesting topic. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.